This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Roger McEowen, K-State and Washburn law professor, starts the show as he highlights his top 10 developments in agricultural law and tax in 2025. K-State Northwest area agronomist Jeanne Falk Jones continues today's show previewing the Cover Your Acres Winter Conference and what topics are focused on. Ending the show is part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast, where they chatted with special guest Cameron Best from Australia and discuss how cattle management is different in Australia. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show with K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Shelby.
Roger, as we've started in a new year, we always look back at the previous year and discuss your top 10 developments when it comes to agricultural law and tax. And starting off with number 10 today, pesticide litigation. And what does this mean?
This is the Roundup litigation, Shelby, that's been going on for a number of years across the country, and it really heated up in 2025. And I think at the heart of the conflict is federal law and the question of federal preemption. Does EPA approval of a label prevent consumers from suing under state failure to warn laws? And we've actually developed a split of authority amongst the federal circuit courts across the country. And we've had states try to come up with shield laws. It's been successful in some states. It's not been successful in other states. There's been some big jury awards across the country. And right at the end of 2025, the U.S. Solicitor General asked the Supreme Court to take up a case to clarify the matter and clean up the split between the circuit courts. So I think we'll probably see that happen in 2026.
Something else we talked about at the end of 2025, a case happening in North Dakota. And what is this one involving, which is your number 9?
What you had was a statute that North Dakota passed known as their CO2 storage law, carbon dioxide storage law. And it said that if a company got 60% of landowners in the path of a project and got them to sign up to grant easements or ownership over a right-of-way, whatever it might be, over their property, and the other 40% didn't want to do that, then the 40% were bound by the 60. That's known as the amalgamation concept. And the court struck that down as unconstitutional. They said that the pore space beneath the surface is a property right that the owners of the surface own, and that cannot be taken without compensation, which the court felt is exactly what happened in this case. And there are other states across the country that have similar amalgamation laws, and I think the North Dakota Supreme Court will likely uphold what the trial court said, and that's going to have implications in the energy industry across the country.
As we keep going through your top 10, what's your number 8?
It's a tax development, and this one is kind of another one of those that is all over the country with select farmers and even ranchers now. And this is the idea of being able to allocate a part of a purchase price or the cost of land that you've inherited, take some of that value and allocate it to residual fertilizer supply or excess fertility in the soil and for the nutrients in the soil. And we don't have a statute on this. We don't have any regulations on this. We don't have any cases on this. All we have is a tech advice that the IRS put out in 1991. It became public to us in 1992 that said, well, if you can measure the amount of nutrients in the soil and determine what the prior owner put on and show that it's above some sort of baseline, then you can allocate value to that and receive a deduction for it. We got a lot of unanswered questions on this. We don't know whether it's depreciation. We don't know whether it's amortization. We don't know whether we can use what's known as a Form 3115 and go back in prior years and catch it up if we didn't take it in a prior year after acquiring the property. And I've seen some massive deductions. I saw one that I reviewed was $40 million deduction allocated to residual fertilizer. And of the audits that I'm aware of, I haven't seen the IRS make any changes on it. So that may indicate that they're kind of timid in wanting to challenge it because they don't have a statute and there's no regulations on it. And they may still be learning about it. But this will continue to be a hot issue in 2026.
And looking at your number 7, a case that's taking place in New Mexico.
Yeah, this is a federal district court case out of New Mexico that's on its way to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, of which Kansas is a part. And this is the notion that the public trust doctrine and its impact on private property rights is pretty substantial. And what I mean by this, in terms of what happened in this case, is the courts upheld a New Mexico law that said that if you own ranch land, you own farmland, you own rural land, and the public needed to get to a stream, a non-navigable stream, and the only way to get there was across your property, they had a right to do it. You couldn't exclude them. And they upheld that as constitutional. I think it's directly contrary to a U.S. Supreme Court ruling in 2021. This is a big issue, though, because they said that, the waters in these streams are owned by the public. The public has a right to them. If your property happens to be in the way, well, that's too bad. That shows us how broadly construed this public trust doctrine is by some courts.
And for number 6, a case that involves ranchers and a product of the USA beef label.
This is a federal court case filed up in South Dakota, and the ranchers that brought that case against the Big Four meat packers prevailed so far in a motion to dismiss the case. We'll see what happens on appeal on this one, but this is the issue that the product of USA label on beef doesn't necessarily mean that beef is born, bred, raised, and processed all in the United States, because there is what some would call a loophole in the law that says as long as it's the final processing step is here, then that can have a USDA product of USA label on it. And that's not necessarily true. As I said, that could be a foreign animal. So we have ranchers that are challenging that. And so far, this case is continuing. It's still a live case. So the meat packers, of course, they argue that because the USDA previously approved the labels, state-level consumer protection and antitrust laws are preempted by federal law. And we'll see what the Eighth Circuit says. But if the Eighth Circuit sides with the ranchers, it's going to set a precedent allowing states to police deceptive corporate practices, even when those practices enjoyed federal stamps of approval.
And what's coming in at your number 5 for 2025, Roger?
A whole bunch of antitrust issues is number 5. We saw this happen in 2025 with respect to right to repair. We saw the Farm Act introduced in the Congress in late 2025 that tries to codify a farmer's right to bypass authorized dealerships in favor of independent mechanics. And then we saw antitrust cases brought with respect to price manipulation in the meatpacking industry and wage manipulation in the meatpacking industry. We also saw some wage fixing schemes in the poultry industry. These cases resulted in settlements, major settlements in some of them, and also additional litigation in the poultry industry about bid rigging. And then at the end of December, we saw a new executive order establishing task forces within the Department of Justice and the FTC. So antitrust issues were big in 2025, and they'll continue.
How was the National Environmental Policy Act involved in your number 4 development?
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court decided unanimously in 2025 that the scope of NEPA was too broad. And NEPA is the law that federal agencies have to comply with when they produce a new rule, when they produce a reg. And they have, under the prior interpretation, they had to consider what we would call downwind or downstream effects of a particular regulation. And a lot of those were tied to so-called climate change and greenhouse gas issues that maybe that regulatory agency had no ability to do anything about. But if this rule would have impacted what they thought would have been greenhouse gas emissions, climate change issues, then they would get tied up in a bunch of bureaucratic red tape, and they'd have to go back and have more hearings and so forth. The court said that's unconstitutional. The agencies are only responsible for what they can control. And so you don't have to analyze the global impact, for example, of livestock methane emissions before renewing a permit. And so this is a big one for agriculture. It's going to translate to lower costs and faster approvals and a major reduction in bureaucratic red tape that has hampered farmers and ranchers on certain things they wanted to accomplish for decades.
And number 3, an example of it, takes us back to South Dakota. And what's this development?
The lead development on this issue came out of South Dakota in 2025. The development is lawfare, where we've seen bureaucratic agencies really kind of target farmers and ranchers, it seems like, on a number of things. And the Maud case out of South Dakota was the big one. That case involved a 75-year-old fence line, a 25-acre parcel, and the family, a fifth-generation ranching family in that area, had managed it cooperatively with the Forest Service for decades. But rather than just a civil boundary case, this got into criminal indictments, and it took a change of administration to get the USDA to remove the criminal charges, and now they're back down to negotiating some type of deal over the border on that case. But the USDA, near the end of 2025, established a portal on their website, a lawfare complaint portal, where they are accepting information on other lawfare instances. So that was a big issue in 2025.
And something that I feel like comes up a lot when we talk, Roger, involving the waters of the United States, and that comes in at number 2 for 2025. Yep.
Back and forth we go on WOTUS, and we got some regs proposed in 2025. In fact, the time frame for submitting comments just recently has expired as you and I are talking. We've had a narrowing of the definition, and it's going to remove federal jurisdiction over a lot of ditches, a lot of streams that sometimes have water in it because there's a continuous surface connection requirement. So very favorable to agriculture is how I see that one.
And the hot topic of 2025, it feels like, as we talked a lot about it, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act coming in at number 1.
That is number 1. We've got 100% bonus depreciation, a ramp up in Section 179. We got an estate tax exclusion of $15 million. We avoided a major tax rate increase across the board for everybody. And another big one is the continuation of the qualified business income deduction, that 20% business deduction for any entity other than a C Corp. And then, of course, we got the commodity title. We got higher reference prices, loan rates, favorable changes in crop insurance, and that was all in the commodity title of OBA, and I've got that at number 1.
That was K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. You can read articles on the top 10 developments in ag law and tax in 2025 on agmanager.info. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing the upcoming Cover Your Acres Winter Conference that is taking place January 20th through the 21st with K-State Northwest Area Agronomist Jeanne Falk Jones. Jeanne, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Jeanne, what is the Cover Your Acres Winter Conference?
So the Cover Your Acres Winter Conference is a really regional type of program to Northwest Kansas, Southwest Nebraska, Eastern Colorado, really focused on production kind of in our part of the High Plains area. And it is very focused on new ideas, on research updates, everything that we hold true at K-State is the type of topics that we're going to be talking about at the conference this year.
And a focus commonly always towards crop production, but is there a little bit of another topic that's made their way into this year's schedule?
Well, there is, and every year we try to weave some ag economics into the schedule. This year we have a little bit more of a presence on our ag economics talks or our farm economics talks because we know that crop budgets are tight. And so as we're looking at what can we implement into our operations, we need to understand the dollars and cents that goes with that. And so we have 4 topics specifically focused on farm economics for folks to work through. And then our other crop production topics, also we're going to have some economics woven through them. So a little bit more focus on economics this year, but a lot of focus on crop production topics.
Talking about those crop production topics, what are the different topics and who will be presenting on them?
So on the crop production side of things, we will have Sarah Lancaster, who is our extension weed scientist. She's going to be talking about some of the early experiences on targeted herbicide applications. So our site-specific herbicide applications, we're going to have Dorivar Ruiz-Diaz, who is our soil fertility specialist, talk about how do we meet crop nutrition needs in these lean economic times. We'll have Lucas Haig, who is the agronomist in charge down at Tribune, talk through considerations when you're intensifying crop rotations. And so a lot of that work has been done down at Tribune. And so we're thinking about how do we intensify, take the fallow portion out or stack a couple of row crops together. So Lucas will be going through that topic. Augustine Obor. Augustine's our soil scientist in Hayes. He's going to talk about how do we work these forage type of crops into dryland rotations. And as cattle prices are getting higher or in pretty decent shape, we'll put it that way, we're thinking about maybe there will be some higher forage needs. And so that's really how do we incorporate some of those forages into our regular dryland crop rotation. Chip Redmond, who is our K-State mesonet manager and our meteorologist, is going to talk through some of the weather resources that we as producers have an opportunity to look at, and how do you know where the data is coming from on those, and then how to pick which one helps give us a good forecast to look at, and then actually the weather outlook for 2026. And then finally, I'll be talking about weed control and crop rotations, and what are the three big questions that I most often get from farmers on weed control in those crop rotations. So those are our 6 topics that will be focused really on the production side of things. We have 4 other topics that are going to be doing on the Ag Econ side.
And what are those 4 other topics?
We will have Dan O'Brien, who is a Northwest ag economist, talking through grain market outlooks and some strategies. We have 2 guys from Kansas Farm Management Association, Mark Wood and Glenn Conover, and they're going to be talking about crop prices and how that affects equitable lease arrangements. We'll have Jenny Ift, who is our she's going to be talking about crop insurance. Usually she's who I think about talking to about crop insurance. She's going to really help us navigate that crop insurance decision, and with some of the changes with the Big Beautiful Bill, the SCO and ECO options, and how that figures into making these crop insurance decisions. So she'll be talking through that. And finally, we have a slight change to our schedule. We had Roger McEowen on our schedule. Things have kind of changed on that end, and Roger can't join us. And so Robin Reed is actually going to be stepping in, and she is going to help us dissect the alphabet soup of the government payment programs. And she's going to give us some updates on what those programs look like, how those are going to be changing this year, and how do we understand what we need to be looking for when we're making some of those decisions. So Robin will be joining us. And then since Roger can't be there in person for all of the attendees, the plan is to have a video of his presentation and send that out when everybody's doing their evaluation. So that is the plan for our schedule. We have 10 topics plus the bonus with the video from Roger after the conference. And then we have industry sessions going on. We have the sponsor area where everybody can go in and visit with all of our industry partners and see the machinery and all of that that's going to be part of this, because the sponsor and industry session is also a big important part of the conference.
And when we look at this conference, you mentioned all those different topics. How do people go about navigating and picking, or how can they see as many topics as they want to?
The conference is actually presented on 2 days, on both Tuesday and Wednesday, the 20th and 21st. Now, the same program runs each day, because we know sometimes it's hard to get away for a 2-day period of time. And so we'll have 4 rooms running consecutively, and the schedule is posted on the Cover Your Acres website at coveryouracres.com. And I always encourage folks to look at the schedule and map out what you want to go see, because we do have sessions that are running consecutively. And so kind of map out the sessions that you want to watch, and then have your plan for the day. That way you don't miss anything that you might want to go back and see. And so I always say, sit down ahead of time and mark out your schedule so you know what your plan is for the day to catch those sessions. But yes, we have 4 rooms that are running, and so plenty of room for folks to be able to slip in and listen to sessions and then go from there.
When does this day kick off and close out?
Our welcome is right at 8 o'clock, and then we have everybody head to the rooms. And so the first sessions really start at 8:30, and then our last session ends right at 5 o'clock. And so it is a full day schedule. We actually have alternating lunch periods, so maybe you can get to another session during lunch. And so, we try to make it so you get the biggest bang for your buck to be here for the whole day. And we encourage everybody to come join us.
Who do you recommend take the time to come to the Cover Your Acres conference?
So Cover Your Acres is really targeted for farmers, for producers, for ag professionals, folks that are in the industry. And then I always encourage that if you have landowners who are peripherally involved, I think it's always good for them to come and hear the kind of some of the challenges that are going on or understand the economics behind things. But really, our target audience is really farmers and our ag professionals.
Are there continuing education credits available?
Yes, we do have continuing education credits available. We have those available both for certified crop advisors, for our CCAs, and for 1A commercial applicators. And so we have sessions, they're noted on the schedule of what is available. For our CCAs, we have a lot of sessions that are available for credits. For our 1A commercial applicators, we have 3 sessions that are available for credits. So yes, if you are needing credits for your CCA license or your 1A commercial applicators license, you can catch them at the conference.
What is cost of registration for this conference?
If you register by today, January 14th, we have a discounted cost structure. So if you register by today, the cost for attending on Tuesday the 20th is $60. If you attend on the 21st on Wednesday, the cost is $55. If you choose to register for both days, the cost is $80. Now, if you miss the registration or plans changed and you want to join us, then the registration after today goes up to $80 a day.
If people would like to get registered for this event, how can they do that?
Yes, we make it pretty easy. It's just coveryouracres.com. And so if you go to the coveryouracres.com website, you can see details on all of the sessions that we're going to be having, and you can do your online registration. And so go ahead and go to coveryouracres.com. It'll send you to it looks like a K-State website because it is a K-State conference. And so once you get into that, then you will see all of the details for the schedule, for our speakers, for registration, for our sponsors. Everything is listed on there.
And this conference taking place January 20th and the 21st, but where is it taking place?
Yes, it is happening at the Gateway in Oberlin. So this is right at the intersection of 2 highways, very easy to find, great parking, good location, and great facility that we have there.
Jeanne, you've mentioned sponsors a couple of times, and while all of the sponsors are very important, are there a couple you would like to mention?
Yes, all of our sponsors are important, and they really help hold the costs of the conference down for our farmer attendees and our ag professionals. And so we do have a couple of platinum sponsors, and many of these have been with us for several years of the conference. We have Acres Equipment, Hoxie Implement Company, LDI for Lang Diesel, SurePoint Ag Systems, and 4G Farm and Sales. And so a couple of them have been with us since actually the inception of the conference 23 years ago. And so we appreciate their longtime support of the conference, but all of our sponsors are very important for us.
Jeanne, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yes, you're very welcome.
That was K-State Northwest Area Agronomist Jeanne Falk Jones discussing the Cover Your Acres Winter Conference. In today's show notes on agtoday.net, I will put a link where you can get registered and find more information. Early registration does end today, January 14th. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad, Bob, Edwarda, and special guest Cameron Best from Australia.
I look at Australia kind of similar to Brazil on how you produce cattle. And one of the big differences I see from US is that we focus a lot on biological function here, which we have the animals confined, we can see them every day, and it's easy to treat. We don't have to worry about predation. While in Australia, Brazil, we kind of focus more on natural living. So they are out in the pasture, they can perform their normal behaviors, but then we have some pressures on health and also predation. So if you could talk about a little bit mortality and some predation that you might face in the situation of having cattle in Australia.
Yeah, well, I refer back to the northern part of the country was where my expertise, and my answer is not going to pertain to the more temperate or southern areas, but look, I can state with pretty good confidence, and, the Meat and Livestock Australia have produced some interesting reports on exactly what the losses are, but dry stock, you're 1 to 2% a year. Breeders, you're going to be somewhere between 3 to 5% losses. However, there are situations where breeder losses get a lot higher than that in certain situations. And then also the predation. We have the illustrious dingo there, and, I think dingo baiting's been going on for 100 years and they're still there. And I think there's an answer there we haven't yet discovered, right? But look, a single dog is not going to cause too much problems. And I've got photos of a single dog walking through a mob of cow and they're not even moving. It's when, they find a weak calf and there's 2 dingoes or something, you're going to lose that calf.
Yeah, a little bit different from our jaguars, for
Yes,
sure.
a lot different to your jaguars because,
We just don't worry about jaguars and dingoes in Kansas. I think it's kind of, occasional coyote problem, but it's kind of nice to know somebody else has got different problems than I do.
Yeah, much different scenario, and it's one of the things you try to control some of those. But when you have extensive grazing scenarios, what are some of the options? Are there options that you can do? Do you check them more frequently? What are some of the management techniques?
Yeah, I don't think there's too many more options. Surprisingly, though, in terms of checking, they're actually quite. They see humans. It's just you don't have them in the yard too often because we have extensive water systems. Yeah. So there's water people, or what we call bore runners, that are out there continually. Every 3 or 4 days, they're going to see a vehicle, and if they're at the trough, they'll see humans out cleaning water troughs and that type of thing. So really, it boils down to 2 decision windows or 3 decision windows at a max a year. And so good management is going to be like landing an aircraft. That's how you have to see those decisions.
So my next question is to how you round the cattle to bring them up to work, because in Brazil it's pretty much all horses, and then I came to US and it's all ATVs, and I've heard that some other places use helicopters. So just want to know what is your way of bringing
helicopters are it's a combination of vehicles. So helicopters will get the cattle moving to the direction where the head stockman's discussed with the helicopter pilot. Then you'll get motorbikes that then pick them up.
Yep.
And then you'll have, a group of stockmen on horses that have a coach mob into that mob. So the actual shepherding's done by the horses when you get them in a big mob. And, a lot of places now invested a lot more fences, a lot more waters. So they'll just aggregate a mob of 800 to 1,000 head and then just put them in a lane with a couple of staff and walk them down to the yard.
So it's a lot about logistics and how to get that done.
Yes, a lot about logistics because, especially the helicopters, limited on fuel. So that head stockman and that head pilot and the pilot have got to be, and they're on walkie-talkies and they're communicating, right, all the time. And that helicopter could be doing another paddock as well.
Yeah.
Going backwards and forwards in the bigger stations. So that's how it's done in the north. But as you move further south, helicopters drop off, and what's happening now is drones are sort of taking that space.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And then as you get further in, obviously it gets more and more like it is here, ATVs and, motorbikes, and still horses. Still a lot of horses get used.
Once again, that was part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. If you want to hear the full episode, you can do so by following a link in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.